What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale. The 2025-2026 NBA look-ahead train continues to roll on. We are up to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which means I have the distinct pleasure and am super excited to be joined by Kyle Theige of the Dane Moore NBA podcast. Does a fantastic job covering this team from all angles. Him and Dane and that whole crew over there do absolutely excellent work. Follow him on the social machines at Kyle Theige, Kyletheige. It's on screen. Links to his stuff will be in the social media, the YouTube and podcast description. Kyle, this is year 3 for you. Welcome back. I'm so happy to have you back. How the heck are you?
I'm doing well. As I said before, this is my 3rd year doing this. This is my 9th year, I think, covering the Timberwolves. Used to be a blog boy, now kind of transitioned into podcasting. I have a face for podcasting before it became video and on YouTube. So that's been an adjustment for me. I've had to shower more. But no one in the game, I do a lot of kind of, hop on a pod, support your friends. No one does better outlines than this guy next to me on the screen. So I appreciate you, because sometimes people be like, hey, hop on the pod. And then it's just like the most awkward conversation, like speed dating. So I appreciate that you sent me a Word doc that might have 3,500 words about about Joan Beringer, and we'll get into him, my new favorite player. But I'm excited, man. The season always comes up. You get really bored in early August, and then all of a sudden it's like you blink and it's mid-October. You have no idea where the fall went, and like we're in it. So I'm excited to ramp up and kind of get back into it.
So am I, which is why these look-aheads are great. Do you ever get that like existential paranoia though, where I think it's like the first maybe Thursday or like that first 14 game slate of the season comes, and then you're kind of, I know you're covering the Wolves, but you're keeping tabs on the entire league. Every year I'm like, how did I do all this? Like that first night where there's 13 or 14 games after like the 2 opening slates or whatever it ends up being, I always just I'm overcome with this feeling of existential dread each and every season.
I mean, I feel existential dread just on a daily basis. It has nothing to do with basketball, but I'm with you. It's kind of like the first night. I mean, the NBA, to their credit, has done a better job of like slow rolling it out and having just a couple games. In the past, it's felt like drinking from a fire hose, where all of a sudden you're like, no basketball, no basketball, no basketball. There's 14 games on Tuesday. And now in the new NBA sphere, it's like, I got to make sure I have 9 different streaming platforms to make sure I can watch them all. And is it blacked out on League Pass? I guess we'll get into that later. But no, I got a little time here to figure it out. But I know, at least for the team that I cover, I'm always just grateful, because those first handful of years were really lean, when it's like, I can't wait to cover a 30 and 52 basketball team. The script has flipped a little bit. And now this team, again, for, going on maybe the 4th year, should be a pretty good basketball team. And dare I say, weird word coming, a contender.
Consecutive conference finals appearances, and it doesn't feel like it gets talked about in the realm of when you're looking at contenders for next season. But before we kind of move there, what are you like? After what happens last season? Just up, down. There's these metrics that paint them. They've the top 4 net rating against top 10 teams, but you saw some of their struggles at points late in games. How they closed out the playoffs. What did you make of seeing all that, watching all that, taking it in, and then what do you ultimately think about how they went about their offseason, where it was just mostly talent reinvestment? Looks like some guys are going to be promoted to bigger roles and all leaves. Just where are you sort of at? Coming at this through the tail end of the offseason?
Well, about 18 months ago, the Minnesota Timberwolves in 35 seasons had made the Western Conference Finals once. So fast forward 18 months to today, and they've made it twice in back-to-back seasons. It's not worthy of a banner in many buildings. For the Timberwolves, it might be, because, again, they have been basically one of the worst franchises in professional sports, not just the NBA. But yeah, it's kind of been, they draft Ant in late 2020, the COVID year, which was like the weirdest draft ever, because you don't have a combine. You don't get to really know stuff. It seemed like every player draft analysts were down on. So the Ant acquisition, as well as Jaden McDaniels that year, kind of was like the new era. A couple of years later, you get Tim Connelly. He makes the Rudy Gobert trade. Days into his new job, doesn't even get the new employee modules figured out. And then since then, it's just kind of been this upward trajectory. So in one sense, you're disappointed, I think, by how they lost to the Thunder, albeit the Thunder then go on to win the finals, the Halliburton injury and stuff, but pretty easily. But they didn't really put up much of a fight, I don't think, against the Thunder, kind of gentleman sweep 5 games, or the Mavs back in 2024, where again, it was like a gentleman's sweep, 5 games. But on the flip side, I still, even though it's kind of a number that we just peg, like guys don't really win titles, enter their prime until 26, 27. It's worth noting that as of early August, Anthony Edwards just turned 24, and it's kind of already elevated this thing to, again, this weird word for all of us to comprehend, contender. So you can go either way with it, Dan. Like, you can say 2 years in a row you didn't put much of a fight, but then as a Timberwolves fan or someone who covers the team, it's like, yeah, for 2 years they made the Final Four, quote unquote. So expectations now are only going to get higher, and I think that's going to put more pressure on them, more pressure on Chris Finch, new ownership, which finally, after 4 years, was settled this summer. So you can kind of look at it in the perfect, is it glass half full, glass half empty, and kind of figure it out. But when your best player's 24, it's hard to have anything but a glass half full view because he's already done so much, and it does seem like his stock continues to rise in the league.
It feels like anyone who looks at this through a glass half empty prism started following the Wolves in like 2022.
Yeah. or was just born in the state of Minnesota and knows that no men's team will ever win a title ever as long as we live. So that would be why your glass half empty.
So how do you feel about what they've done? And there might still be some odds and ends. They have another roster spot they could fill out as we're recording this. But how have you felt about their offseason overall? And I'll say this live because I've been reminding guests just so they know beforehand. I am time stamping when I'm looking down. I'm not actually texting. So I am listening to you. I just wanted to give you a heads up for that because I feel super rude staring down. And I did not give you a heads up about that system.
Dan was like, hey, make your answers shorter. I think, how do I look at this? So I mentioned Tim Connolly coming from Denver, gets to Minnesota in the spring of 2022. And before you could blink, he makes one of the biggest trades in franchise history, maybe in the league history, to get Rudy Gobert. And for those that maybe don't follow the team as much, that first year was really tough, was really lean, didn't work out. And then the second year, so that after one off season of having Gobert, rather than do anything, they just leaned into the same roster. We kind of called it in Minnesota like the run it back tour. And they leaned into continuity. And that team, without any major transactions, without winning a press conference in June or July, had, the best season ever. They go on to make the Western Conference Finals. Then last year, they kind of switch it up a little bit, right? Like after 2 years of Karl and Rudy, they pivot off of Karl, Dan, the night before media day, right? And now they have brought in Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle, and I'm sure we'll get into that. And they go away from continuity, and then it took Chris Finch and these guys basically all season to kind of figure it out again. They do by early April, they just shellac the Lakers. I know all the Lakers were then hurt after that. Ironic timing. Then they play a hurt Golden State team that was not at full strength without Steph, and they kind of cruise by. And then, as I said earlier, kind of get waxed by the Thunder. But this year, again, it's like day one and day two back in elementary school, where some days you had gym, some days you had music. They've gone back to the continuity thing of no major transactions this summer. Their biggest transactions were just keeping their guys, specifically Naz Reid, specifically Julius Randle. They did lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but they feel pretty confident that they can fill those minutes with a Terrence Shannon Jr., a Jaylen Clark, more minutes for Rob Dillingham, kind of a fill it by, everyone kind of pitch in to fill those Nickeil minutes. And Nickeil was a huge thing. One of the best guys I think I've ever talked to. Cool guy, loves to read books, great locker room presence. But yeah, they're kind of going back to what they did 2 years ago when I thought it was the most successful season in franchise history. They broke all these records. They made the Western Conference Finals. They're leaning into, we just want to marinate what we have more rather than get new ingredients. And it's worked for them the last time they tried that. And I think that will be their big theme as they enter training camp of, we're going to go back to war with the same guys that got us there last year.
I found the reaction outside of Minnesota anyway to the Naz Reid contract particularly interesting. Could they have negotiated harder? I mean, 5 years with the player option, yeah, maybe they should have, but it's never going to be 15% of the salary cap. It runs through his age 30 season. And I think one of the biggest forms of criticism I saw is just, well, like he can't be the primary big. That's not going to work defensively. And I'd probably, as someone, as you know, I've been higher on Naz Reid's defense overall, I think, than a lot of other people. I think I could probably agree with that take. But if you're paying someone, if he ever needs to start, 15% of the salary cap, you can go out and figure out a way to get the primary big. It should then be, and I'm not saying this is the issue, The bigger issue would be, oh, we're paying Julius Randle more than that, and he can't be the primary big because he can't play center. And I'm not even trying to poo-poo Julius Randle. I just like, what did you make of that whole reaction to the Naz Reid thing? And I think, where do you ultimately? I don't know if I've ever asked you land on the like Naz Reid defensive discussion.
I think in terms of the Naz Reid contract, it did kind of remind me of like the Michael Porter Jr. contract when Tim Connelly gave it to him when he was in Denver, because that was another one where like, did you have to pay him that much money? I know you like him, and Michael Porter Jr. and Naz Reid, completely different players. As the internet will tell you, some are completely different people. But that's enough about that. So I just think whether it be Tim Connelly thinking from a basketball standpoint, new ownership, because at that point, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez had kind of, this is really legal mumbo jumbo, but like had kind of won arbitration, and it was clear that they were going to take over the team. But you sure as hell can't buy an asset like a professional sports team and then just go get rid of maybe the second most liked player on the team. I mean, Anthony Edwards is kind of in his own sphere, but dude, people have Naz Reid tattoos on the inside of their lips in Minnesota. Like, everyone has the beach towel. Like, Naz Reid is a movement about as close to like
pet name out there too, right?
Yeah, it's like, Prince and then like Naz Reid, 2 words. So I didn't really understand. I always struggle, Dan, with like the new CBA, and we're all still trying to digest it. But also, I think we all have to turn our minds more to like percentage of the cap rather than numbers, because we are a couple years away from a player making $85 million a year, and it's going to be like $1 million per game.
I actually think someone laid this out. I think it was Brian Toporek. I actually work with him at Bleacher Report. That Anthony Edwards is currently on a trajectory to be the first $100 million a year NBA player in the NBA.
And
if he ends
that's going to blow my mind. So with the Naz stuff, the number kind of made sense. You worded this really well. Of could they have negotiated a little tighter? And that's what brings me back to the Michael Porter Jr. thing. Tim Connelly typically just kind of, if we're close, I'll just give in, kind of give you a little more. He is a very pro player. I mean, he's really, one of his strengths is just obviously networking, but also just player relations. So I also think Naz Reid, a couple of years ago when he decided to stay in Minnesota, because this will now be, he was undrafted free agent, had those few years of making essentially nothing. Then he signed an extension a couple summers ago, but he did take, and he said this at Media Day, a little bit of a hometown discount. He's like, I love being here. So it almost was like they kind of paid him back for that. But I don't know, like outside, I know people had weird thoughts and they tried to comp it to like what Miles Turner maybe got in Milwaukee or whatever. But Naz Reid is a huge part of what they do. I don't like big threes, but in this market, 3 of like the best friends are Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels, and Anthony Edwards, and they're all like 24, 25, 26. So the Wolves never had an opportunity, if you remember the Jimmy Butler stuff, to build around their other kind of core big 3 of Karl-Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, and Zach LaVine. So this is kind of like the second chance at building around those guys. And I think that's why Naz was able to kind of get the number he wanted. As for Naz's defense, it has to just get better. And I think he knows that more than anyone. He just needs to become a better defender. They're literally always going to have a 7'2" French guy next to Naz, whether it be Rudy Gobert now, or as I like to call him, Baby Baguette, Joan Beringer down the road. But they're going to have someone to help Naz. But why would you doubt Naz Reid? I guess is kind of the inverse of that, because that man, he'll joke that when he came into the league from LSU, he couldn't jump over the free throw line, not from it, like over it. And that's painted on the ground. Like, he was not a good athlete, and he has shifted his body. He's one of the hardest working guys. He's like a guy that just lives in the gym in downtown Minneapolis. So he got paid. He doesn't have to worry about it anymore, kind of generational wealth. But I would imagine that his biggest improvement needs to be defense, because this team's identity, no matter who's on it, Rudy Gobert, Beringer, whatever, Ant and Jaden are like, especially Jaden McDaniels, like, they're good defenders, and they have more defenders on this team. It's a defensive minded team. And Naz is going to have to kind of buy into that more, be a better rebounder, and be able to kind of defend multiple positions.
And that's fair, too, because one of the bigger misconceptions about Rudy Gobert has always been, if he gets played off the floor, they pull him off the floor. It's like, oh, the defensive matchup is bad. And it's like, no, it's been the offense. It's been the offense since Utah. If you get yourself into that situation in the playoffs, you want to be able to have Naz Reid slide into the 5 and feel good about what you're still doing defensively there.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you're going to see it, I think, this year. They obviously kept Julius Randle, and we can talk about him, and Rudy Gobert signed actually a kind of a team-friendly discount or offer extension last October. So he's making less now. He's making like $30 million. Still a pretty good player. Playoff stuff, is hit or miss. I'm sure people have a bad image of Rudy Gobert in the playoffs. Also, his best game as a professional, at least in the NBA, was Game 5 against the Lakers when he just completely dominated them with like 24 and 22.
The teensy tiny Lakers, yeah.
Yeah, and he got his revenge against Luka after Luka, absolutely just crushed him on that step back 3 in Minnesota last year in the Western Conference Finals, which still haunts me. So yeah, Naz is just going to have to play, either a big 5 sometimes alongside of Jaden McDaniels, who is working out with Kawhi. Looks like he's grown. Makes me so happy because that's like the perfect comp for Jaden is, can you be Kawhi Leonard? But he's going to have to play in situations against certain teams where he is the center. And can you hold up? Can you defend? Can you rebound? I think that's the one I keep coming back to is like, if you're the big guy out there, can you grab rebounds on a team that has notoriously been kind of below average on rebounding? It's why they lost to the Grizzlies a handful of years ago. So he's got a lot of things to work on for sure. You can point out all his flaws, but no player has had a better developmental story in the 36 years this franchise has existed than Naz Reid.
I feel like I'm going to ask you this question each and every year until the end of time. But so about 1 year later, because we recorded before the Karl-Anthony Towns trade last year, where are you at with that deal? Which I think is like in 5 years, I still think we're going to look back on that as like one of the most fascinating trades in recent memory.
I think there's no better way to put it, right? Like it is one of the most fascinating trades. At the time it happened, I remember it was a late Friday night. I had a third espresso martini because as you said, like it was that weekend before media day. And like, all right, everyone's cool. No one makes trades at this point, and then they make this trade. And
I was on an edible trying to do like salary cap implication stuff, and
I bet you that was a blast.
It was not a good time. It was not a good time.
So and Carl, it's not just the trade, right? But it's also Karl-Anthony Towns was one of the most well respected. He was drafted here. He liked being here. He wore the retro merch, and if you're a team that struggled to be successful, you kind of do like the guys that like to stay here rather than demand to go to the coast or the big markets, or whatever. So it completely, in my mind, just put toxicity into the whole season. Like it was just hard for the fans to kind of get around to it. And I totally acknowledge that. Plus they started slow and kind of stumbled. But then Julius Randle had this injury kind of to start the year, like 2025. It was in early January. And he was always so vocal about that injury allowed him to kind of step back and just watch. And he learned a lot. Some guys became more comfortable. Jaden McDaniels had his best 2 months of his career in January and February. And then when Julius came back, they started humming again. And to answer your question, a year removed, it really helped that both teams made the conference finals, right? Because if the Wolves would have made the Western Conference Finals and then Knicks would have gotten bounced in round 1, I think Knicks fans would have been like, we missed Julius, we missed Donte. So it worked out well so far. How is it going to work in year 2? I don't know. But the one thing that Wolves fans are kind of coming around to is that Donte DiVincenzo has been really fun. He's played a lot of different positions for this team. Like with Mike Conley's age, sometimes Donte had to play backup point guard. I don't love that. I don't think he loves that. But he's still a flamethrower. Julius Randle really came into his own, was great, was borderline terrible against the Thunder. Everyone else on the team was also kind of terrible except for Ant. But they did get the 16th pick or the 17th pick. And at the time, it was the Pistons. And you're like, well, I don't know about the Pistons. I became a diehard Pistons fan. I watched probably all 82. And then when they made the playoffs, they end up getting this pick now that at the time, there was concerns of like, is it ever going to show up or is it going to be like that whole, it converts to 2 seconds?
The Washington pick that's about to turn into 2 seconds. Yeah,
exactly. And so then fast forward to this late June and you go out and you get what I think is, I don't know if he's going to be Derek Lively for Ant, like Derek Lively was for Luka, but you go out and kind of get the center of the future, this Beringer kid who only started playing basketball 3 or 4 years ago. I want to talk about him more, but he does tie into the Karl for Julius and Donte trade because he was the other big asset on a team that I guess nationally, Dan, a lot of people always say, well, they traded all their picks for Gobert and they're all in. Well, then since then, they've been able to add young players like Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. and now Joan Beringer through the draft just by being, I don't know, smarter than other teams. So I think both sides, I'm sure the Knicks love having Karl and he's a great dude. I do think the Wolves and the fan base have warmed to the idea of how this all works now. They're more flexible. perfect way to organize the outline, Dan, because they probably don't keep Naz Reid and pay him $5,125 if Karl's still on the roster. It did give them some flexibility. And under this new second apron CBA stuff, like, you do kind of have to find ways to cut costs, even though fans hate it, because you cannot consistently be in the second apron without literally just damaging your ability to add any sort of talent around your team.
I've tried to look at the trade and I've kind of warmed up to it. I killed them when they made the trade at the time. Like, I was perfect example, prisoner in the moment. I just went absolutely in on them. It's like, you just made the conference finals. This is a disaster. Obviously, what they did as throughout the course of last year helped, but the idea that they wouldn't have had both Naz Reid and Rudy on this roster as they kept Towns, but that also now you have Beringer, you have Julius Randle, you have Donte DiVincenzo. So it's not the perfect analog of, oh, Karl-Anthony Towns became like 3 or 4 guys for them, but in some ways he did, because they wouldn't have kept everybody because his salary was just so massive. And that's because he was there for so long, because they just made the conference finals, it's still tough. And the Wolves haven't won anything either. And like, Julius Randle, had some bad moments in the playoffs last year. That was his best postseason performance, just like wire to wire of his career. So I've definitely warmed up to it for them. And I'm not typically a person that's like, oh, like, when you're at a certain level, I'm just pay to keep the team together. That's where I thought the Wolves are at. But a year removed, you understand the vision. And now when you kind of understand the weight of like how different the roster could have looked, because even if let's just say they kept Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, like, what is the depth? Like, you're not dealing with, okay, Karl-Anthony Towns replaces Randle and DiVincenzo. Like, Berenger's there right now. Is Nickeil Alexander-Walker is he gone too? So there's just so many layers to it, and I think we're going to continue to revisit it over the years to come as well.
That's probably the smartest way to answer the question, is that if one of the teams, the Knicks or the Wolves, have a really good season in year 2 of the trade and the other one doesn't, we'll then go back to saying that team won the trade. But for Minnesota, and I think this is like the only time I feel smart about like covering the league at large, it does seem, we were talking off mic, I'm now in my new house. I've had this house for about a year, and the first thing we bought, Dan, was a sectional, but it's a multi-piece sectional, which makes it easier to move up and down the stairs, kind of connect it. I think that's like an analogy for how you build rosters in the NBA now. You don't get a one-piece sectional that is an absolute B word to move up and down the stairs. You break it into pieces. And I think for Tim Connelly, he's like, let's take all that money we pay Karl and break it into pieces. And let's have $30 million for Julius and $12 million for Donte, which is a really good value contract. Oh, yeah. And let's go get possibly a starting center a year from now that makes like $4.5 million for 3 to 4 years. And we have him on team control for almost 9. So I think that was the logic going in. It was a hell of a risk for a team that's never won anything. They finally had a good year, and then they traded their second best player, probably third best player of all time. But that's what Tim Connelly does. He is kind of a fearless GM, and it's worked most of the time. Sometimes it hasn't paid off, but they find themselves now in a window where they're as good as they were with Karl, and probably with more flexibility and maybe a little higher ceiling.
How important do you think it is? It's kind of like a two-layered question that now we get to see, assuming DiVincenzo's healthy, but we know Randle gets to go through an actual training camp with the Wolves, like without having his life interrupted. But also, after watching him last year, is there anything you're sort of like want to see differently for them using him on offense, or just that you're tracking headed into his year 2 tenure in Minnesota?
I would throw Donte into this, because Donte was more vocal. 2 Knicks guys that essentially showed up the morning of training camp and media day, but the timing of the trade hurt the Wolves a lot. And Karl just did a good job of acclimating quicker. But Donte was talking about, like, in January, that it took him a while to just feel comfortable. And I think Julius was the same way. I mean, Julius Randle, I'm not sure he was 100% healthy when he was acquired last September. He had come off that shoulder surgery. Mm-hmm. I don't think he played for the Knicks in that past playoff run. So both of them were at weird stages. And again, with Donte, it was just more time with his teammates, getting to know his guys, and also playing multiple positions. For Julius, it was what I said earlier, that when he finally couldn't play, and you hear this a lot from veteran players, like when they're sidelined with an injury, that's when they pick up the most. He said he learned the most about his guys when he just had to watch him play. And then when he came back, he kind of shifted more into that, not by any means comparing him to LeBron James, but kind of that point forward thing where he was, on a lot of situations, their best playmaker. Like, throw it into Julius, cut, move, set a back pick, and then like get open and he'll find you. And the best games for this team, I think the best games for Julius, were when he had like 18, 8, and 7. Like they didn't need him to have 30 points. They needed him to kind of facilitate, get some rebounds. So everyone on this team now, as we just kind of highlighted, has gotten paid. And that was another theme last year when you're in the locker room is like Naz is thinking about his next bag. Nikhil is thinking about his bag. Like Rudy just got paid, but Julius is thinking the same thing.
Right.
Everyone on this team now is financially secure or a really young guy who just wants to get minutes. And I think, again, continuity, whatever you want to call it, I think Julius now is comfortable in his own skin. He loves playing for Chris Finch. They had their time in New Orleans together. But I think he's going to continue to do whatever Finch says or asks because they kind of need him to be like a Swiss Army knife. Some of the best basketball under Chris Finch in Minnesota was when they had Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson and Julius Randle are completely different players, but they're also very similar. And I think what Finch would love from Julius is to just be that playmaking big, hit some tough shots, space a little more, be more confident taking threes. But just his bully mentality has really kind of worn on Ant or like grown on Ant. And I think he's also kind of a Karl-Anthony Towns and Julius Randle are mentally two different people, two wonderful guys, but they are completely look at life differently. And I think Julius's mentality has been really good for Ant as he continues to grow from a really good young player into like, the quote unquote face of the league stuff.
I will say, if they played the Lakers like 40 times a year, I think Julius Randle might make all defense. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. He's got something out for that franchise. I think where he just locks it.
You're a basketball junkie. Like, do you remember ever seeing someone want to go at LeBron? And again, shout out to LeBron. He's in his 40s. The stuff he's doing is crazy, but Julius Randle had a look in his eye. I was at all of those games in LA and Minnesota, and he had a look in his eye when he would either defend LeBron or go at LeBron. And it was, like you said, it didn't end well in Oklahoma City, but it was Julius Randle's best stretch of playoff basketball he's ever had. So that's another thing to put a pin in of like, can we take that and grow it a little bit with just more continuity and an offseason to kind of season it?
So can we talk about why Anthony Edwards wants to leave Minnesota because he made less than Bradley Beal at one point? Is it about that time of the pod?
Let me call Dane quick because I think Dane went at Kendrick Perkins.
I'm actually referencing that. I was listening to that episode, and
he was so mad.
I was so in my silo, I didn't even know that was said. So I think I'm too disconnected from where I see people or just like saying like, who says that? And then it's on ESPN. But so Edwards last year, the 3-point volume and efficiency was insane, and it got the most coverage. Was there anything else, though, that you thought, watching him about his season, that you thought flew under the radar aside from everyone zeroing in on that outside stuff?
I mean, you could do an hour on the 3-point shooting thing because, again, I'm biased, but also the only draft I've ever covered is during that COVID year when we had nothing else to do. So I knew every prospect and their strengths and weaknesses. And Anthony Edwards wasn't a good shooter. He could make shots, but he wasn't a good shooter. Also, his mechanics from when he was in Georgia to where he is now have completely changed. His body's changed, all that stuff. So I don't know, man, like just kind of waking up one day and Anthony Edwards is the best 3-point shooter in the league was a crazy thing to kind of wrap your head around. Obviously, it's still Steph and like his crown, but for Ant to do what he did in that 1 year and just be like, that's a part of my game that I need to improve, and he improved it to that level is crazy. I think it also hurt some things. He didn't finish around the basket as well. He never truly developed what I like to call like a spot. He would just still take really tough threes. Sickos that listen to this can remember he had like a sidestep 3 in Houston to win the game. That was one of those, no. Oh, it went in shots. But I think the biggest thing going back to the trade with Julius and Karl is that despite Karl's flaws or whatever people thought of him nationally, like he was still a big voice in that locker room. And he was, the older brother to Ant on the team. And when Ant lost him, Ant was forced again, like he was kind of in his childhood. Quick plug for the Ant book written by our friend Chris Hine, who did an amazing job of getting to know the story of Anthony Edwards from when he was a baby to kind of how he got to the league. But Ant was kind of thrust in again at 23 of like, hey, this $3.6, $3.7 billion asset now, this franchise, this pro sports team, it all rests on your shoulders. And he had to do a lot of leadership stuff. And I think for me, being around him, being in the locker room, it was more of what he would say behind closed doors. There was a lot of times where he just said what needed to be said, even if it was uncomfortable. And his teammates really listened to that. And I think that's really cheesy and people listening to this could scoff, but I also have learned by doing this, this too, it's actually some of the most important shit. Like you have to be able to lead and kind of back up your words. And he did that. He hates taking time off. He never misses games, knock on wood, but he's put a lot of time into his body so that when he tells you to, show up early, stay late, he's one of the guys doing it. So 3-point shooting was incredible. I would imagine this summer it's a lot of mid-range stuff, which might drive Chris Finch crazy a little bit, but he still needs to develop late in game. When he watched Shea do it, it's like, okay, the Thunder need a bucket here. What's Shea going to do? You could almost pick in your brain. He's either going to go to that corner or he's going to go to that elbow. Ant needs to develop that of like, okay, tie game. I play for a team that historically was so bad in clutch time and late game execution. If you give me the ball, where are my 2 spots I want to get to that I know I'm going to make a bucket? And I think that'll be something he has to work on this summer.
He's one of those players where, and they're 2 different caliber of players, but I just recently saw this, where you have Anthony Edwards saying he's going to work on something, you just assume that it's going to work out. Where it's like if it's someone else, you approach it with like Mitchell Robinson is working on his free throws right now, and that just makes me terrified because it means, are they going to play him more, where he's valuable, but is that the right call? You and Dane had a fascinating discussion about the mid-range shot, though, where even I'm sure I'm guilty of this as well, as you look at the percentages or like having it as a counter. But what you two really talked about that I found fascinating was it's not just about him being able to make those shots at a higher clip. It's about reading the room. And I think the word he used was delineating between, well, when does it make sense to take those shots? How do I make sure this doesn't come at the expense of good 3-point shots? Or even more importantly for him, looks at the rim. Is that like his next frontier then as a player, that like in your view?
I think so. And you know me well enough. I just really dumb stuff down because that's how my smooth brain works. But I think that when you think of Anthony Edwards at a national level, or if you're a fan of another team and he's coming to town, it's like he led the league in threes and he also can dunk really well. So if I can get him to pump fake from the 3-point line, I know then he's going to go directly to the rim. So it kind of makes that 25 feet an easier proposition. It's like, if he's not going to shoot the 3, he's going to go straight to the rim. So I think, we always talk about 3-level scorers, but for Ant to just even have the threat of, okay, if I pump at the 3-point line, I get you up in the air, I might not just go to the rim. I might just go to 16 feet. He has no floater whatsoever. And again, if I could jump like him, why would you ever take a floater when you could just go yam on someone? But I think just having more tools in his arsenal would just make it so hard to defend him, right? Because I don't want to give him that 16-footer if I know he spent all summer working on it. I don't want to get too close to the rim because he's going to absolutely posterize me like he's done to so many guys. But also I can't give him space, at the top because he, in 24-25, led the league in 3-pointers. So I think that ability is going to be offensively, that'll probably be the thing he works on the most. I think his finishing was just, maybe they asked him to do too much. Maybe it was a fatigue thing. He has continued, like everyone, gotten in better shape in the offseason. But I don't know, you look at the Wolves photos they tweet out, like he is a different looking specimen than he was coming out of Georgia. So I'm not worried about the rim stuff. The 3-point shot is kind of money. But yeah, if he can find that 14, 16-footer to just make it that no matter where you are defending me, you have to be fearful that I'm going to pull up, I think that would be big for him and for this team.
How much of the rim stuff do you think could be attributed to there was just rough, like especially to start the year, like the offense looks rough, and then you're dealing with a different spacing ecosystem when you go from Karl-Anthony Towns to Julius Randle and some of your core lineups?
Well, and when we were talking about Naz playing center, sometimes the most fearless Anthony Edwards is when it's like a Ant, Jaden, Naz, and a couple shooters out there. And, how does that team defend? How do they rebound? A lot of question marks, but it's spaced out 5 guys and there's no one in the paint Ant has to worry about. He has done, in my mind, and I'm very pro Ant, but a very good job of somehow navigating, still getting to the rim with Gobert, who's oftentimes in the dunker spot. But yeah, this year, more than any year that he's been here, it's like I got Julius camped out 10 feet away, calling for the ball. Rudy's right under the rim. He's got his hands up, and I'm trying to dunk on someone. Yeah, and Jaden's in the corner shooting 12% from 3. This is a nightmare. So I think his ability, again, to kind of hit those mid-ranges should maybe ironically free up some more space for him to get to the rim. But if you listen to Chris Finch speak about Ant at all since the season ended, and Finch's borderline sometimes like a father figure to him and how he is critical and Ant takes it well. He said he's like, Anthony's finishing at the rim was not good enough, and it's something that he has to improve on. And again, when you're built like that and you're that athletic, the mid-range stuff needs to come, Dan. But also, why isn't Anthony Edwards in that group of guys that get 10 to 12 free throws a game, right? Like some of it's Ant's fault because he just yells all the time and thinks everything's a foul, but he's also physical enough that's like, if Shea can get you 12 free throws a game, like why can't Ant get 10? So, and a lot of that will come from just putting more pressure on the rim, putting more pressure on the officials to call the foul. But getting back to the rim and not just being so 3-point happy is something I definitely think Chris Finch is in his ear about.
I also think this would be a conspiracy theory of mine, but I think there's more favorable whistles at this point. I don't even want to say more favorable, but I think there's more like value assigned to contact when it's coming from someone who's playing with a change of cadence or more herky-jerkiness than someone who's using like this raw explosive ability. It feels like we expect, oh yeah, guys are supposed to bounce off him, or he's supposed to bounce off guys like that. I feel like a lot of the time we write it off.
Yeah, I'm full into football mode. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm literally doing a fantasy draft right here as we speak. I feel like Derrick Henry just doesn't get a lot of calls because he's one of the biggest, baddest, MFers on the field. And I think with Ant too, he's just when you rank the shooting guards, he's built different than a lot of the other shooting guards. He's not, and this might be something they talked about in kind of exit interviews after the season. Maybe he does need to kind of get back into that gaming the system thing. I don't think he wants to do that, but the league, at least this last season, has shown that they'll give you that if you master the ability to kind of outsmart the refs. So there's a fine line there. I don't want Ant to be hunting. I don't want to be a foul merchant, right? I don't want to be hunting free throws, but I do think it's a part of his game that he could lean into a little more because he just is so fearless and physical that I think sometimes he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt that other physical players, but other guys that are a little smarter, have a little more experience get.
When that Karl-Anthony trade first goes down, and as I told you, I hated it. When I tried to rationalize it, I looked at it from the perspective of Julius Randle as a secondary creator and ball handler. Mike Conley's getting older. I found Rob Dillingham to be last year one of the most fascinating players in the NBA because of what they gave up to get him. I'm even more, maybe it's morbidly intrigued by him now because of, I know he dealt with, I think it was ankle stuff last year or whatever, but I'm even more intrigued by him now because of what his role was not last year, because I do still look at this team and think Anthony Edwards overall, I do believe, is improved as a decision maker when he's getting blitzed, facing all those doubles, like whatever. But like it still feels like there's a lack of throw the ball to someone else and make it's him and it's Julius Randle. Like I don't trust Jaden McDaniels necessarily in that role. I don't trust Jaylen Clark. Maybe Terrence Shannon Jr. can do some of that stuff. But Rob Dillingham is supposed to be that guy, right? Like the guy who could play off of Anthony Edwards, can do stuff with the ball, get off the ball super quickly. What are this is such a dumb, it's a simplified question. Like, what are the stakes with him this year, given how last year went?
Like everything, like in a weird way. I've always joked that this roster has a ton of talent, and there's no denying that. They also don't have a lot of guys that can dribble, which is like a pretty big thing to do in the league. So everything you said from like 30,000 foot view is actually spot on. Like you're not expecting offensive shot creation from Jaden McDaniels. Naz Reid has a really good handle for a big guy, but he's not necessarily initiating sets, getting the ball moving. He's kind of more of a finisher. Rudy Gobert, no. I like watching him play. No game. Other than that fadeaway jumper he hit in Game 7 against Jokic. Just no game. And then, so if it's no Ant and Julius, and you can kind of signal in on those guys, who else? Mike Conley is 38 now. He's still a big part. He's a safety blanket for Chris Finch. It's kind of a lightning rod in this community because people do love Rob, and you used future draft capital to move up last summer to get him. So there is, if you're a Vikings fan listening to this or a Minnesota sports fan, there is like a tie between what the Vikings and all the pieces they have, but they need their quarterback, JJ McCarthy, to kind of hit in year 2. It's kind of the same thing with Rob Dillingham of the Timberwolves are still going to be really good. I mean, they made the Western Conference Finals last year pretty much without Rob Dillingham ever doing anything.
Yeah.
But they need, as you saw against the Thunder, when the Thunder could just throw triples at Ant and be like, we're not worried about Julius. We'll make everyone go to you. And Ant had no one to just get off the ball, kind of like Shea would do in times with J-Dub, right? Like, let me just throw it to him, get the pressure off me. Maybe I'll get it back. So there's a ton of pressure. Rob Dillingham is only 20, I believe, still. But he's going to have to kind of be thrown into the deep end more this season. Even if Mike Conley still starts, which is my expectation, I don't imagine he's going to play. I think Mike Conley somehow at 37 played like 70, north of 70 games last year. That can't be the formula this year. It should be closer to 60. And when he's not out there, again, who's going to start alongside Ant? I prefer Donte to kind of stick more to, I call it the Malik Beasley role. I don't know legally, Dan, if we can even mention that name on this pod right now, but I
As
wanted
long
to
as
be
you're paying your rent,
okay.
it's
Okay.
fine.
So they're gonna need a lot from him. And last year, I kept calling for a gap year of like, let's just let the young kids swim and see what happens. Chris Finch is here to win games, and that's kind of, I guess, what your goal should be. So they might have lost some developmental opportunities, but then when you saw Rob in Summer League or Jaylen Clark or Terrence Shannon Jr., he did look like a guy who was a little bigger, a little more seasoned, a little more patient and calm. I think the game was really fast for Rob Dillingham in year one, as it is for many rookie point guards. But yeah, man, there's a lot to like about this team, and they're going to have a high win total projection and all that stuff. But I mean, you could really say that, like, for them to get over to the next hump, it is specifically about what you're going to get from Rob Dillingham, because if he's good, this thing could be great. And if he's not good, it's harder for me to see how they break through that ceiling that they've had of being a Final Four team that can maybe win one game in the Western Conference Finals.
What type of stomach do you think they have this year to maybe let him go through some of the motions, though? I'm not saying he doesn't need to earn playing time, but like you're still talking about, you said he's 20, someone who's going to be up against this steep learning curve. But there are these they're not even just temptations to where it's we need to take this veteran club out of the coach's bag. No, like Donte DiVincenzo is just better right now. Or you might prefer Jaylen Clark's defensive intensity. Throw Terrence Shannon Jr. out there because they have so many either better or more proven alternatives. How hard does it make it for them to stomach what are, you have to assume there'll be a fairly good amount of not so great moments at the, but you're doing this in service of, well, I'm a big believer in getting the real game reps. Like, okay, Summer League is cool, G League is fine. I get they're also operating on an immediate window, but you looked at this kid, you said he was worth control of your 2030 and 2031 draft picks. Like, at some point, it seems like you need to, like, take off the kid gloves, so to speak, and like give him, whether it's a 15 or 20 game stretch to start the season, to show you that he either is ready, isn't ready, is on track to be ready, or something. Because to me, he's still such a mystery box. Like I like a lot of the aesthetics of his game, but like I still don't necessarily understand how well they're going to translate to the way the Wolves want to play, to even the NBA at large.
Last year, in hindsight, he didn't have to play because he was 19. Yes, he was a lottery pick. A lottery pick on a good team doesn't always matter as much. Like, you can maybe season them for a year. I kind of call it the Jordan Love thing, right? Like, you can sit behind him for a year. If Rob Dillingham doesn't play this year, all of a sudden, summer of 2026, I mean, he's like in that, Trey Burke, Donte Exum, like his career now is like over, and can he be a salvageable like bench player? So I think there's a ton of pressure on Chris Finch, and it's probably one of the biggest things he's facing. He's well liked by Tim Conley and the new ownership group, so I don't think he's on a hot seat, but he's going to have to find a way. I mean, Chris Finch doesn't like when you make mistakes, nor do many coaches, right? And this is a team that wins a lot of games, and Ant gets to make more mistakes than others, but that's kind of, he's the best player and he fills a lot of other gaps. With Rob, I think Chris Finch, who I am maybe one of the biggest fans of, is going to kind of have to let his guard down a little bit and give Rob the ability to make mistakes while still playing in a system that is proven to be very successful. Again, we could talk about anyone, but the Rob Dillingham thing is, for me, going into training camp coming up, it'll be the number one question of how much more prepared is he this training camp than he was last training camp? Has he just figured out life in the NBA, all these different things? He's had a great mentor. His locker is next to Mike Conley's in the locker room, which I don't think is not planned out. But he's going to be a huge deal. And if he can even just give them like average point guard stuff, I think they're going to be really good, because they don't need him to be a primary scorer. They do need him to be a primary ball handler at points, but Ant can bring the ball up, Donte, like they still have other guys. But yeah, it's like, to me, it's something I think about at an unhealthy level of, if this kid's not good, that's going to be a massive red flag because of what you invested in him. And if he is really good, that kind of gives you more hope that they're a contender, but they're maybe a tier 2 contender, that they can be a tier 1 level contender and actually compete with the Thunder rather than just show up to Oklahoma City for 2 or 3 games and then get bounced.
Jaden McDaniels has another fascinating season last year. My question about him, to boil it down, is twofold. What was the primary catalyst for him sort of flipping the switch? You talk about the 2-month stretch, but the efficiency holds up for a good amount almost through the end of the season. what was the primary catalyst between him kind of flipping that switch? And when you look at his offensive ceiling in general, how much of it is tied to carving out an adequate number of minutes for him at the 4 spot moving forward?
Oh, I'm not trying to slurp, but like that, you are really good at this. And I don't know how you know so much about all 30 teams, because my big thing is, I've told this before, like Jaden McDaniels is my favorite player. He was the stock I was most right about coming out of 2020. I've lost a lot of money on a lot of stocks, but Jaden McDaniels stock has paid me pretty well. And everyone thinks he's a 3-and-D wing. I've come around to more that he's a 4. Like, he's a big guy. I referenced that he's been working out with Kawhi Leonard a little bit. He's like 3 full inches taller than Kawhi Leonard. And for us in Minnesota early on,
6'10", right? I
right?
forget how big he is.
We kind of thought like, oh, if he could be Kawhi, that'd be great, because he did have a lot of offensive game. I watched him when he was in Washington out here. Like he was an offensive player, and then he quickly pivoted to be a really good defensive player. He should be in consideration for an all defensive team every year. But I think going back to like this log jam at the 4 and 5 with Rudy and Julius, and now a freshly minted paid Naz Reid, I think his best minutes were at the 4 in January and February when Julius Randle was out with that injury. So that's when he kind of discovered other parts of the court that weren't the corner. He's a competitive dude. He punched that wall that one time and broke his hand, but I think he should be as scared of the corner sometimes as he was about that wall, because he's just, for whatever reason, not a good 3-point shooter from the corners, but he does so many other things well. He's really hard to guard in transition. He's so herky-jerky. He is like the size of Kevin Durant, right? He does not have Kevin Durant's game, but he's not going to get a shot blocked no matter where he takes it off. So if he has a 12-footer kind of rocking chair, leans back, it's always going to go in. So I think that's another thing Chris Finch has to find a way of. They just gave like $250 million to Julius Randle and Naz Reid, and they have Rudy Gobert, but maybe their second most important player on the team, kind of the running mate, we joke, but like the Scottie Pippen to Ant's MJ, is Jaden McDaniels. And are you continuing to pigeonhole him into a 3, or can you find more ways to have him play at the 4, where maybe he's just in this new modern NBA that continues to change in front of our eyes? That might be more of his comfortable natural position.
Do you have who is the big you want him on the floor with most when he's playing the 4? I think last year, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Naz Reid was probably on the floor for most of those minutes. Is that the end? Like, the minutes with him at the 4 are all over the place, but they have a lot of lineup noise in there. I'm just curious, what big would you like to see him on the floor with if he's there 4?
I think Naz, they are like legitimately the best of friends, not just like teammates. Like, those guys are like elementary school type. I've known that guy for 30 years. They haven't, but like, they are best of friends. So I think they have a good chemistry with each other. I would like to see Jaden more with Julius, because I think Julius, as he gets to know his team for another year, like, could get Jaden in better spots to produce and score. I've never loved like Jaden at the 4, quote unquote, and then Rudy, because I just think they're two very not spacing players, even though obviously Jaden can hit threes. But so yeah, I think Naz would be one. Hell, let's just move the chess pieces around, and now Jaden's playing the center. I just want to see him in more of a up tempo, and I think maybe we'll get into this because there's a guy on this team that is all up tempo, but more of an up tempo team that plays smaller spaces of the floor more, and then gives Jaden more opportunities to either be in the dunker spot or to get those kind of 10-foot. He really is comfortable in the mid range. So yeah, Naz and Jaden would be great. A little more Julius and Jaden would be great, but overall, what Jaden did last year, even if it was, with an asterisk because Julius was on the bench, they needed that growth because they had just paid him last October, and they needed to kind of see like, hey, are you eligible to kind of level up and match Ant's trajectory? And I think last year he showed some really strong improvements. It's like, okay, we can continue, as Finch always says, to kind of build blocks on top of that. So he's another one, not that everyone on this team has a major season coming up, but behind Rob Dillingham, it's like, okay, is Jaden McDaniels the January, February Jaden, or is it like the November, December Jaden that was frustrating a lot of fans?
Can I ask you about some of the other quote-unquote kids on this team?
Yes, the young pups.
I was recording a Hidden Gems podcast, guys who we think deserve more attention and could have bigger roles, with Basketball Poetry's Mike Shearer a couple weeks ago. He pointed out to me, because we both picked Timberwolves. He picked Jaylen Clark. I picked Terrence Shannon Jr. And I did not realize this. It's there. I should have known this. That Jaylen Clark had logged more minutes than Terrence Shannon Jr., but I come in thinking, well, part of the reason they were okay with Nickeil Alexander-Walker leaving is they just have Terrence Shannon Jr. right there. I want to know what your overall thoughts on him, but I still view him as like immediately to this team. I think he'll have a bigger role than Jaylen Clark this year. Is that an accurate read of the situation, though?
Yes. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. could. Naz Reid will still probably come off the bench, but I think Terrence Shannon Jr. will be like the 7th most played guy. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. will get more minutes than Rob Dillingham. I know I just spewed a bunch of words about how important Rob is, but Terrence Shannon Jr. was drafted as like Terrence Shannon Jr. is older than Anthony Edwards. Like Terrence Shannon Jr. is ready to play right now. You saw it in Summer League. When he gets in transition, he's as good as it gets. And that's high praise. Not from me, but like from front office members from the team that are like, if he just gets the ball and starts running, like no one can stop him. And you saw flashes of that later in last season. But yeah, Jaylen Clark originally won over Chris Finch, the Timberwolves head coach, because he played a specific role. They needed a guy to kind of 3-and-D it, although Jaylen Clark's shot is still a work in progress. But he just kind of translates out to be an ideal 3-and-D guy. He was the best defender in college before he tore his Achilles. So yeah, I think Jaylen Clark will play. I think he'll be more of the natural fit for Nickeil, even though Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I'm going to miss him so much. And I will be curious to listen to the pod you do with someone from Atlanta. He's going to be a huge factor for them because he's found his swagger. He's great defensively. He can play make. He can shoot. They're going to miss a lot of that. And they're going to get some defense from Jaylen, but offensively, they're going to lean a lot into Terrence. And I could imagine seeing, lineups where it's like, Ant and TJ and Donte and Jaden and Naz, and that team is just, their whole identity is going to be run and run and run. And I think that's something, this team was terrible last year, as you know, in transition, like bottom 5, bottom 7. Terrence Shannon Jr., I think alone will fix that. But also, Rob Dillingham needs to play because a year from now, if he doesn't, he's going to be labeled a bust. Terrence Shannon Jr. needs to play because a couple of years from now, he's going to be retired. Like he's an older guy, even though he's only in year 2. And he's built to play now. He's got the body to play now. And if he can space the floor, it's the only question mark of every time he gets the ball, he loves to go to the rim. He was 4th in college his final year, I think, free throw rate. He needs to shoot more because, again, as we just talked about, the lane is pretty clogged with Jaden and Julius and Rudy. If he can show, and he did in Vegas a little bit, if he can show that he can catch and shoot, so when Ant gets doubled, he can trust TJ as one of his best friends. I think that'll be big for him. But yeah, man, if I was buying stock in anyone, maybe even in the league, like I'm going to sniff around most improved player odds for Terrence Shannon Jr. once it comes to the season, because if those things are like 30-1, I might try to pay the mortgage with that.
The problem with it, to take a flyer on it, the problem with those ones are it does seem to just go to the big name that improve the most. And
100%.
There's no consistency to it. It's just so tough. But you mentioned the transition stuff with him. I actually think more so sometimes than the secondary creation or ball handling, whatever. The thing that might frustrate me most about specifically the past 2 years of Wolves basketball, I just want them to play in transition. Not even a little bit more, but like a healthy amount more. He seems like someone who could help with that. They have guys. I know some of it is, okay, if Rudy Gobert grabs a rebound, like your offense is probably just going to be more set than him grabbing a rebound, throwing like these outlet passes or getting off the ball quickly. But like, don't they have the person, especially Julius Randle's like a grab and go guy. Anthony Edwards can do it. Donte DiVincenzo, they traded for 2 of those guys. What am I missing here?
This is going to be another really dumb answer, but I think Anthony Edwards is one of the most impressionable people ever. And if you got to know his childhood and everything he went through, you kind of would get it. I just don't think anyone has gotten through to him the value of it. And and I know that sounds so dumb, but I think when Anthony Edwards shows up to training camp or in these summer workouts and he sees TJ get the ball and just hit the X button, like hold it down and just sprint to the other side, and it's going to be like, that shit's really cool. I want to do that too. And again, Anthony Edwards is kind of the older brother to Terrence on the roster, but Terrence has had more birthdays. So I think if Ant's like, yo, that guy's just doing that, I'm going to do it too. But I'm so with you. And a lot of the transition stuff that you just highlighted does come back to Ant has just not wanted to do it. Or Ant hasn't learned the value of just getting into, essentially an NHL-like power play of, Ant, if you get the ball and you go 3-on-2, it's just going to be so much easier for you than those Thunder grinds where it was like everyone is looking at you. So in terms of like offensive philosophy or what is the low-hanging fruit for this team from last year to this year, the number one thing on the whiteboard should just be, can we get in transition more? Like, maybe you won't be a top 5, top 7 team in transition, but can we be like top 15? Because for the last couple of years, it's been a slog and they play slow. Some of that's on Rudy, but like, I think Rudy's going to play a little less. I think they're going to play smaller, maybe give Beringer a little time. So they should get on transition as much as possible because they have 2 guys in Ant and TJ and Rob too, right? And Rob Dillingham's probably one of the fastest guys in the league. Of, can we get a stop? Our identity is to get stops. But as soon as we get that stop, can we just go rather than kind of look around and really try to figure out what the off or the defense is doing? Just go. If they can see the value in that, it's going to be a massive thing for their offense.
Bittersweet development if Anthony Edwards focuses on getting out in transition more, but that's where some of his mid-range volumes come from, is pulling up at the free throw line in transition.
Right.
So Jaylen Clark, just maniacal on defense. What is he on offense, though?
He's not much, but he's a really smart player who there's multiple times in Vegas where he just went cold from 3 and then he would hit one. He would do the prayer hands emoji. I think he's not going to be asked to ever initiate offense. I mean, Nickeil Alexander-Walker spot started for Mike Conley when Mike was out. They don't have that anymore. Obviously, they hope that Rob will fill those shoes. But for Jaylen Clark, I think it's literally just, can you be a 3-and-D guy? He kind of signed an interesting contract. He's a really smart kid, by the way. But so he's a restricted free agent next summer already. So he's got like a payday coming up. And I think for him, if he can just be, I mean, I'm sure you can think of guys off the top of your head, but if he can just do what maybe Jaden can't, can you just hit corner threes? Because defensively, I think, is already like at a Nickeil Alexander-Walker level. I mean, he is such a dog defensively, but like the Wolves had Josh Okogie back in the day, who was a dog defensively, but if you can't score, it's hard for a coach to play you more than, 4-minute segments. So if he can continue to refine his shot, he, to me, more than anyone, has completely changed his jumper. If he can just be even like a league average 3-point shooter mixed with that defense and maybe playing more shooters around him, I think that'll be big for him. But I think his ability to space the floor will determine if he plays a lot or if he's kind of just a nickel cornerback that you play on third down type stuff. And
so Joan Beringer, I saw a lot of him during Summer League. I came away very impressed. I think everyone will harp on it. What was it, the game against the Suns? He had all those blocks, whatever game that was.
Yep.
There's a lot of fouls. There's a lot of rawness there. I was impressed with, and there's a lot of rawness on offense, but he can like really dunk, and he even like at one point busted out a push shot. I try not to read too much into Summer League, but I watched entirely too much of it this year for something I was working on. I am #intrigued by Joan Beringer. So what are and also his last name kind of sounds like a brand of wine, right?
For sure.
See if it comes out or if it's already out. What are just your early impressions of him?
He has no idea what he's doing, and it's the biggest compliment you could give him. His story, as maybe people heard during draft night, was he only got into basketball because he stopped fitting into soccer shoes. He's from France. He's only been playing the game of basketball, I think he's 18, for 4 years. So when he came out for that first game in Summer League, I think he, at the time, before a weird stat correction, which why are we doing stat corrections in Summer League? He tied the record for most blocks in a game. And after the game, talking to a member of the front office, I was like, that was cool. And they're like, it was cool because he didn't know what he was doing. It wasn't like understanding defensive schemes or, I mean, you don't scout your opponent in Summer League. You're more focused on just being in Vegas. But like once he just understands, and I think that would be cool to be tutored by Rudy Gobert, who is, one of the most famous French centers that the country's ever produced. So that'll be good for him. But once he actually just learns the game, I think it's going to be fascinating because they love him because he is a ball of clay. I mean, he's super athletic. I kind of made the Derek Lively comp. I don't like comps, but it's how my brain works. It's like, okay, can he just be this rim protecting rebounder? That's all this team needs with all the offensive options they have. But yeah, if he can just be molded into Rudy Gobert, no one ever got in his ear about like, could you give us a push shot? And, 10, 12 years ago, when Rudy got here, centers weren't expected to maybe produce as much, but Rudy's just never developed any sort of offensive game, right? Maybe he can catch on the roll and then kick it out to a corner, but there's no offensive game. There's no post-ups. I think with Beringer, they're like, we can tell this guy to do whatever and he'll do it and he'll learn it. And I don't expect, I personally would like redshirt him. Like, I don't want to see him play this year. Cause again, I go back to like Jaden should get some more of those minutes. I just think he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League. He's going to be developed a lot, but I also don't think it's a hot take to think that maybe next year, if you have me back on this thing, that he's going to be projected as the starting center. They are so high on the kid. They had flirted with maybe trying to move up in the draft to get him. They were elated when he fell to them at 17. And he is, Rob is still the guy, as I've said now 100 times, like that they're really banking on. But Beringer is in their minds, the lively to Ant's Luka, and they need him to be the center of the future because not only is he on a cheap contract, he has more offensive ceiling than Rudy Gobert's ever had. Defensively, he has so long to go to win 4 Defensive Players of the Year. But Dan, I don't think they drafted Anthony Edwards. They drafted Karl-Anthony Towns, first overall picks. But he's about as exciting to me as like Zach LaVine was in this market where like, I don't know what he is. He's just super athletic and he seems like a modern day player. So if they coach him up right and they season it right, I think they got a pretty good one in Beringer.
People will laugh because he was just the number 17 pick that you said you could see him starting. I'm sure people would have laughed if they would have said the number 27 pick and Rudy Gobert would win 4 Defensive Players. And Tim Connolly drafted him, right? And then moved him. What was that? How did he end up in Utah? Is that what happened?
The Rudy thing, yeah, I think he drafted Gobert and then traded him to Utah. Yeah. He does have a keen eye for centers. So they're all different, right? Like Beringer and Jokic and Gobert are kind of vastly different players, but they were so happy to be able to get him. New ownership was in the room making the call. I think Alex Rodriguez was on the phone trying to say Beringer's name. So they're very excited about him. But I also, if you're a Timberwolves fan listening to this or just a casual NBA fan, I would hope that unlike Rob Dillingham, who kind of needed to play last year, they needed some of his stuff. They don't really need Beringer right now. They just need him to learn the game and learn all the different little intricacies that go into being a good defender. Because I think the offensive stuff will just naturally come for him as he gets older.
Did not include this in the outline I sent you, but where are we at with Leonard Miller watch?
Next question. I mean, they had another slew of young guys. Josh Minot was kind of a developmental second round guy that didn't get to play much at Memphis. Good kid, just never had a chance here. And then he ended up in Boston alongside Luka Garza. I don't really know with Leonard Miller. I don't love, this is like a Scoot Henderson take that I have living out in Portland. I don't love the G League guys sometimes because I just don't know if they go through the system in the right way. Leonard Miller was a G League guy. He's got a lot of tools. He showed those. He could just grab 10 rebounds with his eyes closed in Vegas. But offensively, what is he? He can shoot, but he doesn't make a lot of them. So is he like I was guilty of a couple of years ago being like, is that the next Lamar Odom? No. But like, I just don't know what he is. He'll probably be their emergency big at times. But again, going back to Finch, the reason Jaylen Clark got off the bench this year was because Finch could say, do that. And he trusted him to do that. I don't know if Finch knows what to tell Leonard Miller to do. And I certainly don't know if Finch trusts Leonard Miller to do it. So to me, he's like the bottom of the barrel. Maybe he has a chance. He's still young. Maybe he needs a new team that doesn't have high expectations. A lot of tools, though. He's really matured. He's long. But if you're trying to kind of carve out a rotation for this team, I don't think Leonard Miller is going to be in it.
I think you just spent more time on him than any other podcaster will.
Yeah, that sucks. We should cut that.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter / lightning round portion of the
Yes,
podcast?
Absolutely. This is my favorite part.
So we've talked about a few of them, but when you look at this roster, what do you think is kind of their single biggest need right now?
What I said earlier, guys that can dribble. Because if Mike Conley's 38 way up here and Rob Dillingham is 20 and down here, and one of them is really experienced but slow and maybe injury prone, the other one has no experience. If neither of those guys can work, I think the fallback plan would be Donte to play alongside Ant a lot in the backcourt. And I just hate that. Not because Donte can't do it, but I just think Donte DiVincenzo is more comfortable flying around screens, taking 30 footers. The one thing I've really learned from talking to like Mike Nori is that playing point guard, I mean, you are doing the quarterback stuff, even though people hate the analogy. Like, you have to focus on so many other things to just get guys involved, make sure there's space, make sure you're running the right play call from the bench. I don't think Donte wants to do that. Like, I think he just wants to kind of play free basketball. I mean, he didn't have to do a lot of that in New York. I think that was
No.
Jalen Brunson's responsibility, or even Josh Hart or something. So yeah, the point guard position in general will be the thing that opponents highlight any night they play the Timberwolves of, is it going to be the old guy who we can get around and can't really defend, or the young guy who has some juice but also can't really defend? So point guard, point guard, point guard for this team. If they have enough to get by, they'll be a really good team. If they don't, they're going to ask even more of Anthony Edwards. And I think they already ask a lot from him, even though he is trajecting up to be a superstar. There's only so much you want to ask of one player. And I think that'll be kind of the fine line this season.
Is there anything about this team, probably on a national level, whether it's good, bad, a storyline, whatever, that is flying under the radar right now?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the fact that they didn't do anything in the summer other than kind of maintain their guys. I mean, you saw what Houston did with a splash to get Kevin Durant. The Wolves were in on that. I don't think the Wolves were in on that at what the price was being reported, but they were interested to bring him in. And then obviously OKC is just going to get better. And then Denver had maybe the best offseason. So the top of the West probably got better while the Wolves just leaned into continuity. But I don't know. They have all the same players and then some of a team that made the Western Conference Finals last year. So I think continuity is boring. Like, I don't know. Greeny doesn't bring up continuity on First Take a lot, but it sometimes is the thing that leads you to being a successful organization. And I think the Wolves probably prefer to be a little under the radar and doubted because they haven't shown a propensity to accept being, the favorites in a lot of situations. So they do have more nationally televised games than they've ever had. I think they're like top 5, but I think they'll be cool as we get into September and we start to get to training camps in October. If people aren't talking about them, I think they'll be a good like chip on our shoulder team. And that's kind of how Chris Finch likes it.
This will date it because it'll eventually, but like they're just sitting on their mid level and they have the space beneath the second apron to use it. I'm curious if just like, I don't think they would throw it at a Malcolm Brogdon, at least not the entire thing. But like if there's just like a surprise buyout, because we're seeing more buyouts over the offseason now, since so many of these teams that guys who get bought out want to play for legally cannot sign them in the middle of the year. So it's just like, I don't know, like if Chris Middleton brokered a buyout with Washington, just as an example, I don't think he'd pick just the minutes available in Minnesota, probably wouldn't be there. I'm just watching it just to see like, will they do something with it? Like they're clearly not trying to spend like through the teeth, but they're still an expensive team. And so far this ownership group has shown a willingness for the most part to invest in the roster. So I've just like put a little pin in that.
Yeah, this is kind of reported, but they had good conversations with Damian Lillard before he ultimately signed where he was supposed to sign. Like, it's such a cool story out here in the Portland market for Damian Lillard to come back and rehab for a year and maybe try to bring the Blazers back. But that was an option they tried to maybe sniff around of like, that would solve a lot of your point guard stuff down the road, not in October. But yeah, one thing Tim Connelly did say, Dan, after the season was just as someone who's building a roster, right? Or if you're shopping for groceries, you do kind of want an unlimited budget because then you can go get the best of the best. Tim Connelly was like, we understand this CBA enough now that it is actually like a death knell if you are in the second apron multiple seasons because of the repeater tax and all that stuff. So I think maybe if the right opportunity presents itself, I know Malcolm Brogdon's still out there. I always tell my Timberwolves fans, like, maybe he's out there for a reason. Like, if he was, a needle mover, maybe he would have been signed by now. But I think they're going to try to keep financial flexibility for this season as best as possible so they don't have, player incentives or random stuff happen that they go into the second apron again, so that next summer when, as you saw, Tim Bontemps and those guys at ESPN kind of put the Wolves in like this all-in window right now, we could be looking at next summer losing Mike Conley, losing Rudy Gobert. Maybe you pivot off of Julius Randle, and all of a sudden the Wolves are one of the youngest average age teams in the league with financial flexibility. So I'd be shocked if they did anything. I think Bones Highland eventually becomes a Timberwolf again. Tim Connelly loves to take care of his guys, but I would be shocked if by the time they tip off in October, if they made any more splashes. And I say that as a guy, and like you said, a year ago, Tim Connelly just said, let's rip the Band-Aid off and make one of the biggest trades in NBA history on a Friday, September 29th. So anything could happen with Tim Connelly, but I think this is going to be the roster and the rotation in mid-August that you're going to see in October.
This is one of my favorite exercises to go through for me in advance of the season, trying to pin down who will be the most 10 played players, it it was fairly easy for me when it came to the Wolves. So who do you
Yep.
see as being the top 10 most used players here?
Well, every year covering a team, just like one team, you have a specific theme or trend. Years ago, Dane Moore called it like the weirdest team ever. Last year, we all said 8 starters forever, and it was like Mike Conley, Ant, Jaden, Julius, Rudy, Nikhil, Donte, and Naz. It was 8 starters, and then fans would get pissed that the young guys didn't play. This year, you subtract Nikhil Alexander-Walker, which again, I think all fall we will understate how big of a loss that is. He was a great guy, but you fill that. So now you're down to 7 starters, the same 7 I just listed, plus Terrence Shannon Jr., plus Jaylen Clark, plus Rob Dillingham. I think, like in a fantasy draft, there's a steep cliff at 10 where I would be shocked if anyone else plays. Like I said about Beringer, super exciting prospect, 17th overall pick. I don't see any minutes for him right now. Joe Ingles is just here to make people laugh and occasionally inbound the ball. He is their best inbounder, which again, you're like, how's this team a contender if they can't dribble and throw the ball in? It's a great question, Dan. Leonard Miller, like Bones Highland or whoever they get, they'll have those 10 guys. Chris Finch said after the season in the exit interviews that he's like, I need to expand the rotation. He mentioned 9 or 10. I don't know. I mean, you cover the league way better than I do. It's hard to have a 10-man rotation and keep guys happy. Like guys don't really want to play 6 minutes a night. You know, they kind of sometimes want to either DNP or get like 12, like 2 6-minute stints, first half, second half. So Chris Finch said it, not me, but I'd be shocked if they get to 10. But I also think there'll be pitchforks if it's anything less than 9.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go that deep, it's like the team has to be conditioned for it at the top to where I don't like how many like minutes did Tyrese have. Like the Pacers to me are the example, or the Cavs were just so good. It's a bad one, but like the Pacers just, and I do think functional depth is more important than ever, where it's not just this party trick in the regular season. It's
Yeah.
no,
yeah,
you want
yeah.
to be able to tap into it in the postseason. But yeah, I don't know who. I had a question of like, who do you think could rise or fall in the rotation? The answer is probably just Rob Dillingham to both. Is that I could see him being squeezed out of it. I could see him also, is he starting by the end of the year? If you told me that, it wouldn't shock me either.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'm just so on this Terrence Shannon Jr. hype train. I think Rob has a clearer path to just minutes because, again, like you got to dial the minutes back for Mike. If you think Mike Conley is still a playoff guy and you're going to rely on him, then you have to stop playing him so much in the regular season. Like you got to give Rob more opportunity. So Rob has a clear chance to start. Terrence doesn't, but I think Terrence also has a clear chance to be like possibly a 6-man if things break out well. So yeah, those 2 guys, and again, Jaylen Clark, plus, like I said, Donte off the bench. They're going to have 9 or 10 guys that any night probably expect to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't envy Chris Finch at all because I think that would be one thing Chris Finch is really good at is like explaining to guys. You talk to NBA players, like, I like knowing, even if I'm not going to play, I like knowing I'm not going to play. They don't want to be kind of tossed around. And Finchy does a good job of that. But for a guy that loved playing 8 guys to try to go to 10, I think it's going to be a fascinating kind of story that we follow in Minnesota all summer or all season, because for better or worse, Dan, I don't believe him. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off, but we'll see. Cause he does have the ingredients to kind of cook something up.
Well, look, why don't they just win games by a bunch of points? That takes care of, like that's the easy solution.
That would be fun because that would also eliminate them from having to, I think they were like one of the 3 worst clutch time teams last year, and the other 2 were like, I don't know, maybe the Wizards and the Hornets. So it's like, how are you a contender when you're in that group of games or that group of teams? But yeah, if they could just maybe blow teams out, it would be a lot easier for me to play my bench.
I think for this team, especially, this question is to some extent matchup dependent. But what do you view as their go-to closing unit? Do you think it's just going to be the starters, or are they really futzing and fiddling with one of those 2 spots there?
Wow. I hadn't thought of that yet. I haven't gotten my brain to that point, but I think the beauty of it would be what you saw, again, to kind of glaze over, like give the coach some props. 5 different guys at any night. Like, I don't think Rudy Gobert is at a level now in his career where he has to close. And I think when they acquired him in 2022, he was like, you got to close with Rudy. I don't think you have to close with Rudy anymore. Obviously, Ant will be out there. I think even Jaden, despite maybe some of the spacing issues that you could have with him, he has to close because he is by far your best defensive player. Finch trusts Julius with a bullet, so he would be out there. But yeah, some combo of Ant, Jaden, and Julius, and then matchup dependent, right? Like, I think you'll see Terrence Shannon Jr. close more games. I think Finch has shown an ability to close with Naz instead of Rudy. Can you rebound enough, right? Like, one thing Finch has told me and others is like defense isn't about just like getting them to miss a shot. It's can you get the rebound, right? Because if they offensive rebound the ball, like they just have another opportunity. Like defense actually is about getting the ball and then going up your side of the court. So without Rudy, this team has always struggled to rebound. So I'll say, as I just filibuster, I would say they probably close most nights the way they start. And that would be with Finch's two most trusted players, Julius Randle, Mike Conley, his best player, Anthony Edwards, and then his two best defensive players, Gobert and Jaden McDaniels.
Is there a weirdo lineup you want to see Chris Finch try this season?
Yeah, dude. Leonard Miller brings the ball up. He's spaced by Joan Beringer and Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and like Naz Reid. Like that's just like
five centers, basically.
Yeah, 5 centers. No, I actually think to go the other way, because we're starting to do like the 2 timelines conversation, which I know if you're a Warriors fan, you're like, oh my God, don't do that. But I would say some combination of like, this is my sicko lineup. I do really like Rob Dillingham. I just trust Terrence Shannon Jr. more. But some 5-man lineup of Terrence Shannon Jr., Anthony Edwards, Donte DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, and Jaden McDaniels that has a ton of spacing, a ton of physicality, a ton of just lunatics, like guys that are just like crazy people. They might fight you. And that would be the most fun and probably the best chance of them kind of getting out in transition. So give me that 5-man lineup on like a cold, dreary December night. And I'll text you and be like, hey, league pass right now. Our boys
I'll need that alert. Although it's too close to what mine was. I want Beringer surrounded by 4 shooters. So give me Naz, Edwards, DiVincenzo, and then I don't know who should be the 4th guy. Like Jaden McDaniels is just not. I don't know if I trust him enough. Like maybe Terrence Shannon Jr. I mean Dillingham could be in there, but then you're really small.
And on that quick, just because I probably did a bad job of setting this up, Beringer could play. Like he could, if he was drafted by the Hornets, right? He might be their starting center. He would be their starting.
Yeah,
I feel bad because one of my best buddies, like I shit on the Hornets a lot, but they're just I think of them because what they've done with LaMelo Ball and not focusing on winning is like when they got Ant in Minnesota, like we need to put him in winning positions every single day to mature him quicker, and it's worked. But yeah, Beringer could play. It's just they have the strength of this team and of this roster is still big guys. They have 4 guys 6'10" or bigger who can play and play real minutes. But yeah, man, like a Beringer lineup with Naz at the 4 and then Ant and hell, you want more shooting like Donte and TJ or Rob. I'm so with you. Like that team could sprint up and down the floor. You're getting me way too excited about
Dillingham would be I think, because then you have your plus defender is Ant and sometimes DiVincenzo, and then you're hoping Beringer just doesn't know what he's doing, but his block percentage is like 12% or something like that. So
dude, if you're listening to this and you're not a Timberwolves fan, you got to be wondering, so the team can't dribble. And also, I don't know if I've ever watched a team that doesn't know how to throw lobs more than this team. Like, no one knows how to throw a lob to Rudy. So Rob Dillingham, in my opinion, is probably the best lob thrower. So I think like a Rob and Beringer little 2-man game could be really fun. But again, you're right. Like, I think part of the reason they drafted another 7-footer from France is that they still do believe in Rob. And like, if Rob Dillingham is the point guard of the future, we need to have as many offensive options out there to make his game easier, but also defensively, because Rob's never going to get bigger. But you see young guys, or I should say small guys in the league that have made it work, but they've only made it work because they have other good defensive players around them.
Before we wrap up with a couple of predictions, is there anything that we haven't discussed do you think it warrants a conversation?
No, it's just if you are aware of the Minnesota Timberwolves, you follow them or whatever, like it's been 4 years of trying to get new ownership. And you've seen multiple teams just like, oh, hey, I woke up on a Tuesday and I burped and the Lakers were for sale. Or like the Celtics sold overnight. The Wolves did this layaway plan that then got legal and all this stuff. And that's finally behind them. Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez have become the majority governors of the Timberwolves and the Lynx. So that's been like a chapter that's closed. And now they're kind of getting their own people in there. But that some of their own people are already in there. Tim Conley, Matt Lloyd, kind of Chris Finch was before them, but I think just that going away and there being even less distractions. I talked about how pretty much everyone on this team that we think is going to play has been paid. This team has things to work on and improve because they weren't close to the finals last year. Like it was a gap between them and the Thunder, but they also have maybe the least amount of distractions in the league. Like even the Thunder, right? Their distraction will be that now they're defending champs and everyone's coming for them. I think the Timberwolves have no distractions. A group that wants to spend, is willing to spend, talking about new arenas in the city now. So I think the ownership thing is just worth mentioning because so far, so good. I mean, new ownership syndrome is a thing, but when it takes you 4 years to get the keys to the house, Dan, sometimes you lose that desire to repaint the walls. And I think Mark and Alex have done a good job of being patient and not trying to do what, like a Matt Ishbia did. That's kind of, they're not new owners, even though they've only technically owned the team for, I think, like 65 days.
Well, yeah, and I wonder if it helped, like, because they were involved with, like, the Tim Connolly stuff. Maybe they got it out of their system gradually. Like, that's
They
slow
basically
burn.
they had training wheels on the bike. You mentioned that earlier. Like, they couldn't just go 2 wheels. They had to have 4, and I think it allowed them to learn the intricacies of owning a team and prevented them from making, like, we're just going to trade 9 more picks for, I don't know, another Rudy Gobert. So
I will say Bulls fans have to be hoping that their flagship market team is the next one to sell. Like the Lakers and Celtics just sold so close together, or at least came to terms on it. If you're a Bulls fan, you definitely want to get the Reinsdorfs out of there. Knicks fans probably want Dolan out of there too.
I think whoever you have on to cover the Bulls might be the first. Like, I'm more excited for that season preview you do than any other team because, I don't know, we both grew up like Michael Jordan. I have a lot of Bulls gear as like a young kid. And I can't think of a franchise that is in a weirder direction right now than the Chicago Bulls.
They're still coasting off of Jordan's titles is basically what they're doing.
Yeah.
So how many games do you see this team winning, and where do you see them stacking up in the regular season as a Western Conference seed?
I can't remember if I saw the over was like 50.5, but I'm going to just say like 52 and 30. It's just been like a number in my head. So I think they go 52 and 30. Where does that put them in the West? I think they're a clear top. Yeah, maybe in the play-in. I do think they're going to be. I think they're going to be more of a regular season team because again of that continuity. So many like Houston is going to be awesome to watch, but it's going to take them, I think, some time to figure out adding a guy like Kevin Durant. How does the hierarchy of that work? So maybe they get out of the gates in November and December a little slower. I think the Wolves are kind of built to eat up innings and to win a lot of regular season games. I mean, we just talked about 10 guys that we think all should and could play. I don't know if that's the case for a lot of other teams if they have 10 NBA rotation players. So I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games. Maybe it's like 55 and whatever the math is, 27. But playoff-wise, it's going to be really interesting because I was just probably super pro Timberwolves for 80 minutes. I do think if this thing doesn't work out in the postseason, you could look at a team that faces some massive changes next summer. Again, like you're aging out of one timeline and maybe you're getting smaller, faster, more shooting in the next iteration of Anthony Edwards' career. But we're about one birthday away from Ant being, 25 or whatever in like the prime of his career. I know, right? So I think it'll be an interesting season, but now there are real expectations. And there was expectations last year, but there was no like downside. I think this year there will be expectations that if they don't meet them, there will be some significant changes because they always talk about in Minnesota, like having bites at the apple. Mm-hmm. They know, I know you joked about this earlier with Kendrick Perkins, but Anthony Edwards loves it here and he just is totally happy. He doesn't demand a bigger market, but he'll never be the type of mentality that wants to be on a rebuilding team. So you need to continue to have rosters and flexibility able to take bites at the apple, because if you can't, that's when you start to get worried about the other teams kind of circling, coming for your best player.
Non-Thunder division, what do you find when you're looking at a potential playoff matchup as of right now that we're so far away? What team in the West either concerns you the most or you find particularly intriguing?
The Wolves and Rockets pre-Durant had just kind of some fun, spicy games because I think Ime gets those guys to play tough and it's a fun rivalry. I also think the Wolves were pretty close. I mean, I think they really wanted Durant, and him just pretty vocally being like, I don't want to go there, would make for an awesome playoff series. Wolves Nuggets is just the history of some of this stuff. Tim Connolly coming from there, coming here, what happened in Game 7 a couple of years ago. I think that'd be a fun series. I'd be frightened because I think that Denver team is like my favorite to win it all. Or just, can you play the Thunder? Like, can you do it, right? Like, can you put your best against their best and beat them? Other teams in the league, I don't know what you think about like the Lakers, but I don't know. DeAndre Ayton's not going to like scare me in a playoff series. So those 3 teams, Houston, OKC, Denver, would be really fun. And they're, I think, above the Wolves, but any team below them, I don't know, man. Like, I should probably sound like a homer, but I'm not scared of any team below the Wolves. If you think even like the Clippers, I'm not scared of any of those teams because I don't think they have the size, the speed, and the athleticism to kind of keep up with what Minnesota has.
I do think, and this is a compliment to me anyway in the West, is that their floor just feels like 6 in the West. Like I would be flabbergasted if
that's
this
a good
team is
point.
in the play-in. Kyle, this was great as always. Thank you for giving me so much of your time, almost
Appreciate it,
90
man.
minutes of it. Are you just able to tell our audience where they could find you and all the fantastic work that you do?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter/X at Kyle Tigey. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not really on any other social platforms, but and then over at the Dane Moore NBA podcast, Dane Moore has a really cool story as like an independent journalist who has built a pretty cool pod and has all the beat reporters on every week, and we're kind of growing that thing. So 5 days a week we're doing pods. It's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. It's been fun, man. It's a lot of fun to get to not only cover a team that you grew up cheering for and watching, but also stuff like this, getting to know you and all you do. So I'm online probably more than I should be, but we're going to be pumping out a lot of content this year because, again, for only the third time in like my life, my favorite basketball team is actually kind of respectable. So
you guys are a behemoth over at the Dane Moore NBA Show. One of my favorite
Appreciate
podcasts, like I said before. The links to it will be in the podcast and YouTube description. As you know by now, I'll be pestering you again down the line,
Yes.
Kyle. And until next time, we end as always with a shout out to the one, the only, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.